So one of the main reasons most of us will get African cichlids is because of the coloration of the fish. That's what draws us to them in the fish stores. When you go in, they are the closest thing you're going to get colour-wise to a saltwater fish. So they're really appealing, and that is the big reason we usually choose to keep them. They do have a lot of character and personability as well, but colour seems to be the main attraction for this fish. Hence why getting the best coloration out of the fish is probably one of the most discussed topics. So there's different things that can affect it. Genetics is a main one, but there's also sort of feeding. So making sure you're feeding carotenoids, krill, spirulina, things that are known to enhance colour. But these are all things that take time, and there's a subject that not a lot of people discuss or talk about all that often when you keep these fish, which can give you an instant result for the coloration of the fish, and that is lighting. So lighting can make such a difference to these fish and how they look in your tank if you get it right. So I use AI Hydra 52 HDs. These are very expensive lights. They're usually for reef tanks. However, they have been an absolute dream on this tank. So each one's got 4 pucks, and these pucks are all filled with different LEDs, and they're very customizable. So what it lets me do is they're app controlled, and I can choose the percentage I want each one of these LED bulbs on. So I've got complete control of the light spectrums which are going into the tank. Because I've had the luxury of being able to do this with these lights, I've really had to play around with them in the different settings, and it's really made me notice what a difference certain coloured bulbs make to the actual fish and how they look. So you could have a tank full of fish that you're thinking, oh, I'm not really feel like I'm getting the best colour out of these, and you're comparing them to videos you've seen on YouTube or photos on Instagram. These videos you see on YouTube and the photos on Instagram doesn't necessarily mean they've got pedigree fish with perfect genetics. They might just have really cleverly lit their tank to get the best out of the fish. So I'll show you a few examples of what I mean. What happens is most people, when they buy a fish tank, a lot of fish tanks will come with lights built into the hood. So you'll get default bulbs, and a lot of these default bulbs will just have white LEDs. Sometimes you might have the odd sort of blue one in there, but if you're just getting tanks where they've just got white LEDs, or a lot of older tanks as well, they have T5 bulbs, which are your long fluorescent bulbs which you just twist in. And most of them are white too. But there's different options you can choose, whether you've got LEDs in your hood, whether you've got the T5 units, which can have a similar effect to the LEDs where you're putting certain spectrums in. Now, one of the main ones, what I use on here, which really has an impact, is they have a UV LED. So when you inject that UV into the tank, it really makes some of the colours on these fish pop and stand out. Like the eye biter has these fluorescent fins at the tips. If I turn the UVs off, it doesn't look like it's fluorescing the same. It has the similar effect on these fish to what it does on coral when you have sea coral reef tanks and they're all glowing. It's usually the blues and the UVs and stuff which is making them pop. And I've found that it has a similar effect on these fish. So LEDs, in my opinion, is the best option to go for. You don't have to spend a fortune on ones like this. You can still get others that are customizable, others that have set it and forget it. But what I'm going to do is I will do a little experiment where I'll show you what the tank looks like with just the white LEDs on. So I'll turn down all the other spectrums I'm putting into this. I put in blue, red, UV and white, and I mix it into a blend so that it all looks the way it does now. So it all blends together, but we're still getting the pops on the colours on the fish without it looking like a bloody disco ball in there and loads of different spectrums all over the place. So I'll show you what it looks like when it's white, with just the white LEDs in, and then we'll turn the white LEDs off. I'll show you what it looks like with just the UV bulbs on, and when you see it with just the UV bulbs on, you can really see how it makes some of the colours pop then. Right, so this is it with just the white LEDs on. So we're only switching on the whites. You can see the difference in the tank already to the previous clip. So some people, I mean, it's down to sort of your personal preference on it. Some people will prefer this look. But what I think it does is not only when you have these lights on, does it give your fish more of a washed out look, but it highlights any sort of algae you might have growing on your rock. So you like your brown diatoms and things like that. You can really see them quite clearly when it's just the white lights, and it makes the tank, I feel, look a little bit uglier. So you can see the substrate looks completely different for a start. You can see the algae on the rocks, and then some of these fish have really lost their crispness. So you can still see obvious colours in here, because there's all spectrums are light in white, but we're not giving it those additional LEDs what help everything pop. So the blues have died down, the pinks have died down, they're a lot more washed out, bleached out, and it's the same with some of the reds as well. The yellows don't do too bad under the white light, so some of the yellows look a little bit better, especially with that OB, looks a little bit better under the white light. But in my opinion, that doesn't look as good as it did before, and the fish aren't popping the same. So this is just with the light, so I've got no other colours coming into this, no blues, no UVs, nothing like that. And this is how most people, when they buy fish tanks and the lights are built into the hood, whether you've got the T5 lights or you've got the LED bars that are already built in, this is the default setting. So this is a white light, they're usually white LEDs or white bulbs, and this is usually what you get. And what happens is when you've got these built-in units on your fish tank, people don't tend to try something different. So they just think that's how the fish tanks should look. But you can go out and buy different types of bulbs sometimes for these fitting, depending on what brand tank you've got. And then you can also get different bulbs for the T5 units as well, which we'll talk about. So they do like an actinic bulb in the fluorescent bulb, and that has elements of UV that will go into your tank. They usually use those on coral reefs as well. But it gives it a little bit of blue and a little bit of UV, which if you have alongside another white bulb and they're blending together, it can really help you get that pop on the fish. The reason I don't like T5s all that much on a display is because you don't get the shimmer like you do with LEDs. So when you've got LED lights, they have that spotlight effect and you get the shimmer on the bottom of all the ripples, which looks dead natural. Whereas the T5s are like they're a blanket of light. So you don't get any shadows, you don't get any ripples or anything. It's just boom, lit up. So it looks less natural. But if you have got a T5 unit, you can get them bulbs to solve the problem. So what we'll do now, we'll switch it over. We'll change the light settings. We'll just put the UVs on. And then it doesn't look appealing when it's just got the UVs on. But what I want you to see is how it affects the colours of some of the fish and how it makes some of them look really vivid and pop out. Right, so this is just the UVs. Let me turn that off and see if it gives us a better... It's quite hard to film it this colour because it doesn't do that great on the camera with sort of your bluish lights. If you've ever tried sort of filming a reef tank, they're really difficult to get right because cameras don't like them. But you can still see from that camera. The naked eye, it looks a lot more vivid, but on the camera you can still see how the pinks are exploding. It's really highlighting these metallic hues on the fish. So the faces, where they've got these metallic like scales, it's really having an impact on it. Look how crisp the albino dolphin looks, the effect it has on the whites, and how much it cleans it up and polishes it. The reds pop, the yellows fluoresce a lot more, and then it really highlights the blues on the fish. And African cichlids have a lot of blue accents, so it's important that you get those blues highlighted because it makes the body of the fish look better. So I'll see if we can get a little bit of a close-up on it, see if it films any better. But you can see what I mean, certain aspects of the fish, it makes pop and glow. Now that on its own, you know, if we just had the UV bulbs on their own, it's not very appealing and it wouldn't be very good. But if you blend that in as part of sort of multiple LEDs, so if you blend that in with whites, if you blend it in with some reds, some blues and the UV, and you blend it all together, and then that makes everything pop. So you still can visibly see the fish and watch them. It still looks bright and visible, but the colours are popping at the same time because you're mixing them all together. And then this is the end result when we've blended all of those colours together into the tank. So as you can see, in comparison to how it looked with the white lights before, it's giving everything a little bit more character. It's highlighting some of the colours that the white lights weren't initially making pop, and it does make a difference. I mean, look at the eye biter now. All the blues glow, the pinks pop. It works, and it's an instant result for the coloration of your fish. So you might not have noticed it if you've got these default white bulbs, because it's not really something, when you get your first tank or a tank you've had for a long time, it's not really something that you play around with or tend to change because you think it's already there. You've got lights, it's lighting your tank up. It's not a priority. But if you're looking for that extra sort of oomph on the fish, it is worth it. You don't need to spend hundreds of pounds on them. You can still get sort of cheaper versions, which we'll run through after. These are app controlled, so this is how it looks on the app. These are my settings, and these are the percentages that I will use for each colour LED bulb that's over the tank. And as you can see, it's got loads of different features on it. You can ramp up, ramp down. We've set the time, so it ramps up over 3 hours, ramps down over 3 hours. But it gives me the ability to play around with these sliders and find something that works and really makes the fish look good. And that's the beauty of it. You don't have to use them settings, but if you have a customizable light, you can play around with it yourself and find something that looks the most appealing to you. So they really are worth it. These lights as well, they're quite powerful lights, so you don't necessarily, this is overkill. We could have the smaller versions of these lights, which are cheaper, and we could just have 2 of them, and that would be adequate for this tank. Sometimes it looks a little bit better, more natural, because it has that more of a spotlight effect. There's less spread. I find if you've got tanks and you have a spotlight sort of effect in them, gives you more shading and more shadows, which make it look more natural. So if you've got one of these default setups and you want to start sort of looking at playing around with the lights, if you've got a T5 unit, so the little fluorescent clip-in bulbs, if you've got those, that sort of canopy on your tank, and you don't want to go out and change your tank or start hanging lights over the top of it, what you can do is you can get something called an actinic bulb. And they look like this. And you can get them in all different sizes that's going to fit whatever size tank you've got. And all you simply do is clip them in. So take one of the white bulbs out, clip one of those in, leave one of the white bulbs in, but then the two will blend and you'll get sort of a similar effect to how these are, where everything blends together. You're getting more spectrum, and then you're going to get a little bit more out of your fish. A cheaper alternative to the hydras are these pop blooms. So they come in a range of different sizes and prices. You need to have a look at them when the majority of them are on eBay. But some of them are app controlled, so it gives you the ability to play around with spectrums. Some of them they'll have like little buttons on where you can sort of cycle through the different spectrums. You don't have quite the same control over it, but you have a timer, you can have a dimmer, and then they'll give you a sort of a good mix of the bulbs as well. One of the main ones that people go for, one of the most affordable ones, are ones like this Nicrew, which is just like a long bar where you can get it to fit your tank. So you can get them in different sizes as well. The cheaper alternatives to stuff like this, they don't have the customizability as the other ones do, but they do have the blues, the reds, and the white LEDs all in one unit. And you can place it on top, set it and forget it. I actually use one when I'm filming in the dark. So this is one of them. And I'll show you how you can you can just cycle through the buttons. So you can start introducing blues, the whites and the blues. You can just have the reds, greens and whites, which is good for planted tanks. So this, I can't actually remember how much this was, but it was fairly cheap. I did get it for the planted tank upstairs, which is about 3 feet, and it lit the whole thing up. But you can see we've got a good mixture of all the different LEDs, and it will have a similar effect to these ones. Not quite as much control over it, but it's a cheaper option if you don't want to spend a lot of money. And you don't feel, if you want to test it and see how it works before you dive in and start spending loads of money, that's a good thing to look at, because that will have a similar effect, and then you can see it for yourself and see that it does work. So before you start getting stressed out with how your fish are looking, you start going out and pulling your hair out, trying all different types of food, potentially hormone dosing your fish like some idiots. Try the lights. Could be what's making the difference. If you've got a tank at home and you've never really taken a look at your lights, and you've got those sort of default from the shop stock bulbs that are just giving you white light into your tank, try something different. Try the actinic bulbs if it's a T5. Try some LEDs that have got different coloured options and a bit of customization to them, and it gives you an instant result. It does work. I've shown you that it works. I've played around loads with this. So my advice, go and sort your lights out if you're not getting the best colour out of your fish.